So, good evening, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Azure Thursdays. So tonight we have two amazing speakers. They're both from Microsoft. We have Abel Wang, who is a principal cloud advocate and DevOps lead at Microsoft. And we have April Edwards, who is a senior software engineer and cloud advocate for Microsoft. So they have two amazing sessions related to DevOps. So Abel is going to talk about GitHub Actions and Azure Boards, and April is going to talk about how you can manage your application delivery with Azure DevOps and A to B testing in Azure. What we also have later on the evening is a panel discussion together with April and with Abel as well. I'm really looking forward to that one. Before we start and before we introduce our first speaker, we have an awesome giveaway tonight. We have 5 Knoxbox vouchers who are provided by our sponsor Experts, and you can use those vouchers and they provide you access to an escape room experience from your own living room. So let's introduce our first speaker. Abel, welcome.
Thank you.
Here. Thank you. How are you doing? Still working from home? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. And yes, working from home. And I will probably be working from home for quite some time.
Yeah?
Yeah, so how does that work out for you now when you're in the league and all that? So can you still manage working from home?
Yes. Interesting enough, we had to pivot at Microsoft, right? Because before we did a lot of events, in-person events. Clearly, we can't do that anymore. But we were in a very unique position where we could pivot very, very quickly. And we started doing online events, streaming type events. So there has not been a lack of work for sure. It actually seems like I'm working far more than I used to before the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and in the meantime, if you have some spare time, you can play on that awesome collection of guitars that are behind you.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
If I had some spare time.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. People always ask me, "Oh, can you play something?" And I'm very self-conscious, right? So I only want to play when I'm fully prepared and fully ready. But I will tell people that Ignite is coming up, and if you really want to hear me play live guitar, maybe something will happen during Ignite.
Oh wow! Oh, I will tune in then. Great. Are you working on some nice projects at the moment? Something that you can share?
So right now, my team, me and my team, we are heads down doing Ignite. There's a lot of content that we're creating for it, a lot of content that we will deliver for it. And yeah, I would say everyone watch Ignite if you can. This is going to be a very, very fun show.
Oh, wow. Great. So I don't want to use much of your time. So please start your session. Good luck.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.
I am super excited to be here today. The talk is going to be about Agile to DevOps using GitHub and also Azure Boards. So let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see my presentation. So here we go. All right, so before we begin, let me do a very, very quick introduction. For those that don't know me, my name is Abel. I am a principal cloud advocate and also the DevOps lead here at Microsoft. And I've been writing code for, it seems like forever now. I think it's over 20 years. And I don't like admitting that because that just shows how old I am now. But yeah, I've been doing this a really, really long time. And I'm really lucky because I get to lead a team of 5 DevOps practitioners, and our sole charter is to help everybody get into Azure using DevOps best practices. And notice I didn't say you had to use Azure DevOps Services or GitHub Actions, because Azure is an open system where you can use any DevOps tooling that you want. And again, we are here to help. So if you have any questions, we are a resource. Please use us. We will definitely help. So everyone then asks, how do you get a hold of us, right? Do not email me, because if you email me, I'm really behind on my emails. It may take me 2 or 3 weeks before I see it. but I'm on Twitter all the time. So if you tweet at us and you hashtag it LOECDA, that will literally light up a team room for us. We'll see it. We'll answer your questions. And if I can't answer your questions, I will find the person at Microsoft that can. So again, we are a resource. Any type of DevOps questions, please, please, please do use us. So clearly, I'm very, very passionate about DevOps, and I talk about DevOps a lot. But what exactly is DevOps, right? Because you ask 10 different people, you're going to get, I don't know, 20 different responses what DevOps is. But at Microsoft, DevOps is something very, very specific to us. So DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable the continuous delivery of value to our end users. Now, I said this really carefully because every word has meaning, right? I didn't say we need to continuously deliver code, because what will that give us? Piles and piles of code sitting on some server somewhere, who cares, right? And notice I didn't even say continuously deliver features, because we can be delivering feature after feature, sprint after sprint. But again, if this is not what my end users need or want, why am I wasting time doing it, right? What is important is we have to continuously deliver value. Value is what's important. So people always ask me, well, why is this important, right? Why do we even care? Why do we want to continuously deliver value? And the reason is pretty simple. Well, let me put it this way. If you don't adopt DevOps best practices, your competition, they either have or they will. And once they do, they will out-innovate you. And that's what's dangerous, because once your competitors out-innovate you, it's game over. You will quickly become obsolete, right? So we've been doing this long enough now where this is not DevOps theory. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt. We have empirical fact now that show teams that adopt DevOps best practices absolutely out-innovate teams that don't. And not just by a little bit, but by a lot, right? Or said another way, guess what? Teams that adopt DevOps best practices, it translates directly into dollars. Teams that adopt DevOps best practices have a 4x higher revenue growth than teams that don't, right? So it goes right down to dollars. Well, if you're from the US, it goes right down to dollars. Teams that adopt DevOps best practices, they make a lot more money. So this is ridiculously important, right? But it's super hard to get right. To do DevOps best practices, you have to address all three pillars: the people, the process, and the products that you use to enable everything. Now, for the people part, this is the most important, right? This is a cultural change that has to occur from the very, very top all the way down to the bottom. Super, super important. Everyone needs to be hyper-focused and hyper-aligned on continuously delivering value. Next is the process and the products. These are actually a little bit easier, right? For the process, you need a process that will let you iterate fast enough, yet still deliver high enough code. And you need products that can help enable everything. And I wanted to double click on the process just a little bit more, because like I said, we need to be highly iterative, right? Yet still deliver code of high enough quality. And we need this to be highly iterative because we want many frequent small releases versus infrequent large releases. So this way we can continuously deliver value. And with many small iterations, we also have the ability to course correct really, really quickly. So we don't always know what we're doing is what the end users really want or what they really need. So if we have a lot of quick iterations, we can now make a hypothesis, spend 2 weeks implementing it, release it to the public, gather telemetry to see if the end users really value this new feature. And if they do, that's awesome, right? Because if they do, then great, we can double down on it and do things like that. And if they don't, it's not a big deal because we've wasted, what, only 2 weeks versus months and months and months of dev times. So then we can reprioritize the backlog, rinse and repeat this process. So what kind of a process will let us do this? The answer is really pretty simple. It's Agile and the many different flavors of Agile, right? Kanban, Scrum, so on and so forth. All of those work incredibly well. So me personally, I'm a huge fan of Scrum. I'm a Scrum purist, so that's what I always talk about. But again, any of these flavors of Agile is important. So when you look at the DevOps world, Agile is so ridiculously important, right? So one of my good friends, Sam Guggenheimer, once told me that Agile is the first decade of DevOps. And this is so incredibly true because you cannot have DevOps if you don't have Agile, right? If you cannot build the right software sprint after sprint, how are you going to continuously deliver value? Which is why Agile is so important. And like I said, I love doing Scrum, right? Why Scrum? It's just one of those Agile flavors that I adopted that I've used with a lot of my customers. Before I joined Microsoft, I was a process consultant where I would literally fly to different companies. I would be embedded in their teams, and I would help them make that transformation to go from being very waterfall to becoming very agile and then adopting DevOps best practices. And Scrum was the process that I used. So what exactly is Scrum? You can think of it as, well, how does it work? Everything starts with your backlog, right? And what's in your backlog? Backlog is a wish list of everything that you want for your project. It gets prioritized. The highest things go to the top, the lowest things go to the bottom, right? And then the team get to decide what they want to work on. So then they figure out what they want to work on. They commit to what they're going to be doing for a particular iteration or a sprint. And then they just work on it, right? They burn down whatever bugs they find in sprint. At the end of the sprint, they show what they have accomplished to the product owner in a sprint review meeting, and hopefully then they push to prod. And based on the sprint review demo, the product owner can then reprioritize the backlog, give feedback, and then the whole cycle rinses and repeats itself. And this works incredibly well, right? So some general principles when you start looking at Scrum, this is not a waterfall project. We don't build the entire thing and then ship and release it, right? We build it incrementally, sprint after sprint. So building the highest priority items on the backlog becomes really, really important. So what this means is the product owner responsibility becomes huge in terms of prioritizing this. And prioritization, this becomes important again, right? Super, super important. Because again, at the end of the sprint, the product owner gets to look at what we've done, right? And now they can give immediate feedback. And this is vital, right? Most of the time, people, they don't really know what they want their software to do until they start using it. So you ever notice how people are super quick to tell you what they didn't like once they start using your software? Well, that's the thing, right? So by building our software incrementally, we can now have frequent inspections of the software and immediately course correct as needed instead of wasting months and months and months of time. And again, the worst that could happen is we waste one iteration, and which is usually around 2 weeks or so, and then we can immediately course correct. So this course correction is super, super powerful. The next thing is that I see a lot of companies make mistakes is that in an Agile or Scrum project, everything should be extremely transparent. So the dev team shouldn't be working in a vacuum. The product and sprint backlogs should be publicly available where everyone can easily see what the team is currently working on and what the team will most likely do next, right? So transparent and communication is key in both an Agile and a DevOps world. And next, I wanted to touch on the different roles on a Scrum team, right? So there are really only three. First, there's a product owner. And like I said, there's literally one job for the product owner to do, and that is to prioritize that backlog. And the first thing I tell new product owners is that this is not a waterfall project. We do not ship when everything is finished. In fact, most likely, we won't ever get to a point where everything on the backlog is finished. So hopefully, we'll be shipping every single sprint. So prioritization becomes incredibly, incredibly important. Next is the Scrum Master. Scrum Master has two roles, right? Number one, to make sure the team follows Scrum best practices, and number two, to protect the Scrum team from outside interference. So y'all ever get that time when some high-level executive walks directly up to one of your devs and tells them, I need you to add this feature immediately, right? And of course, this messes everything up. All of your scheduling, all of your planning, there's a lot of context switching for your devs. So it's your Scrum Master's job to protect this team from people like this high-level exec. They need to tell that exec, nope, you can't just drop something on us mid-sprint. Put it on the backlog, rank it really high, and we can tackle it next sprint, right? So they need to make sure everyone follows DevOps best practices. And finally, there's the dev team itself. This should be a cross-functional team where there is someone on your team that can do whatever you need for your project. And the more cross-functional they are, the better it is. So in an ideal world, every person on the team can pick up any work on the backlog and get it done. But again, this is ideal. We each still have our areas of specialty. So I wanted to give you a real-world example of this, right? So on the last team that I was on, I'm mostly a back-end developer. That's what I do. I'm really good at that. I'm okay with SQL queries, but one time I finished up all the back-end code work, and the only work remaining on the backlog was some crazy SQL query. So again, I know enough SQL to be dangerous, but I didn't just say, oh, that's not for me. What I ended up doing was I grabbed a task, I started doing it, but I paired with a person on my team who is a SQL expert. So this did two things. Number one, he made sure that I didn't do anything horrible with the SQL that I was writing. And number two, this helped me learn how to craft better SQL queries and really upskilled me as well. So again, cross-functional teams, super, super important. The next thing that I wanted to point out is quality is non-negotiable, right? So writing software is like that three-legged stool. So you can have quality, you can have a date when you are done, and you can have features. And guess what? You can only move two of those things. In a software project, and again, quality is not negotiable, right? You cannot scrimp on quality ever, ever. So what that means is if you want more features, you have to move out the delivery date. And if you can't move out the delivery date, well, then you're going to have to reprioritize the features that you're going to ship. And it is that simple. As devs, we are not magicians, right? We can't just magically add features and not take up any more time. So this is something that is absolutely vital to relay back to the product owner and also to upper management, something that they have to learn. Again, if you want more features, either the date has to move. And if the date can't move, you have to reprioritize which features you're going to ship. And finally, the last thing is the rules. They apply to everyone. No one is above the law. So again, you're going to get a lot of pushback, especially from high-level execs, from leadership, especially if you come from a very waterfall type of world. But everyone in the organization must be hyper-focused and aligned, right? So remember, the whole point of moving away from waterfall to Agile is that we finally admitted that waterfall does not work really well for software, right? So 90% of all software projects fail. And by fail, I mean they go over budget, they go over time, there's too many bugs, or the end result is not what the end user wants or needs. So we know the way we did things before and the old metrics we gathered, they're complete garbage. So we must all be aligned with how things are done and measured in an Agile world. And I mean everyone, from the very, very top all the way down to the very, very bottom. So that includes the CEO, right? So whenever someone joins my Scrum team, the first thing I tell them is check your title at the door. I don't care if you're the CEO. I don't care if you're the COO. I don't care if you're a principal or if you're just an intern. Every member on my team, they are just a member on the team. And we are all collectively hyper-focused on continuously delivering value. All right, so that's Agile, right? Agile, super, super important. Another part of the software process that needs to be looked at so we can move quickly is the different types of branching strategies people have, right? Traditional branching strategies involved a lot of long-living branches. You got your dev branch, you got your QA branch, you have feature branches, UAT, main branch, so on and so forth, right? And having all of these long-living branches, it's not very conducive to moving quickly. Because anytime you need to merge code from one long-term branch to another, what happens? You get, boom, a merge bomb goes off, right? Because sooner or later, you're going to get code conflicts. And fixing all of these merge conflicts, it's not easy, it's not pleasant, it's not quick to do. These are extremely painful and expensive problems. And I guarantee you, if you have long-running branches, you're going to start running into them. And the debt that you incur is massive, not just a little bit, but a lot. So to solve these problems, what I like to do is use trunk-based development, where we are basically deving and releasing off the main branch. So when a dev picks up a user story, they create a topic branch, they do their initial work, and very quickly they merge that topic back into the main branch. And with no long-running branches, there's almost no merge bombs. And any code conflicts or merge conflicts that do exist, they can be easily resolved quickly, right? Because the changes have not drifted very far apart. So easy peasy, right? Problem completely solved. But some of you might be thinking, and this is what I used to think as well, how can this possibly work? Because if there are practically deving off the main branch, how are they just not introducing bugs all over the place into the main branch, right? And that's where advanced DevOps topics, things like feature branches, comes into play. Because using feature flags, that solves the problem. And what are feature flags? And you can call them feature flags or feature toggles or switches. It's basically a technique that lets you turn on or off certain portions of your code during runtime. So in one deployment, you can now ship alternate code paths. And during runtime, you can pick which path you want the code to go, right? So this is awesome because now you have separated deployment of your code from the delivery of your new feature. And this makes things really, really flexible. And because of that, every new feature or every new bug fix that you write really should be wrapped into feature flags. And that makes it really powerful. So a lot of people say, oh, I'm not quite ready to do feature flags yet, but I want to tell them, yes, you are, because feature flags is so easy to implement. There's no magic behind it. It's basically an if statement. Well, not even basically, it is literally an if statement. So if your app can do an if statement, guess what? You are now ready to do feature flags. And once you implement feature flags, you can start doing really advanced DevOps techniques, right? Things like doing safe deployments, where you only turn on the flag for a small percentage of your traffic and make sure everything still looks good. And if it does, you can open up the flag a little bit more to maybe like 20%, 30%, so on and so forth. And so then you slowly roll your changes out to your users. And if it's broken, you can roll back really quickly, right? So doing safe deployments becomes really easy. Doing things like A/B testing using feature flags becomes really, really easy. And of course, doing rollbacks becomes incredibly simple to do. Right. So feature flags and trunk-based development, a super powerful technique that can help you move much quicker, yet safer. So what I wanted to show you was how you can use Microsoft technologies to do that really, really easily. All right. So I have an application. This is it right here, and we can run it right now. And it's the Tailwind Traders app. If I go, I have an About menu, and if I click on the About, I get this About page, which really has nothing in it, right? Not very exciting at all. But I can implement feature flags in here to introduce my changes. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean. If I go into the Azure portal, here's my application. I have something called an app configuration, and this is just a resource that you can provision. And inside of here, I can store all of the configurations that I have for my particular application, including my feature flags. So if I scroll down here, look at feature management, notice I have all these different flags, right? So I can store my flags in here. And let's go ahead and turn on my new About feature. And let's refresh my particular application. And when this application loads, you'll notice, dun, 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 instead of About, it now says New About. And if I click on it, it has a whole new page, right? So if I turn the flag off, I have the old code. And if I turn the flag on, I have the new code. So this is actually really, really simple to implement in your code using these flags. So let me show you what I mean. So here's my Visual Studio. You have the ability to add these flags into both the view portion of your application and also into the code portion of your application as well. So basically what I did for my About feature, this is my view, right? I created a feature element. And inside of here, I gave the name, which is the new About feature, which is the name of my flag. And I say if negate is true, so that means if the flag is off, then just print this out, About, right? And if the flag is on, then just print this out, which is going to be my new about. And then in my code itself, remember when I said it's an if statement? That is literally what it is. It's just an if statement, right? So if my flag is on, go ahead and run this chunk of code. And if my flag is off, run this particular chunk of code. So let me go ahead and set a breakpoint here. Let's go ahead and refresh this. It hits my breakpoint. The flag is on, so it goes ahead and runs this particular chunk of code. And then if I go into my view, you can see the same thing, right? So if the flag is on, go ahead and add this chunk of code. And if the flag is off, negate is equal to true, output this HTML. And if the flag is on, output this HTML. So it's really simple to implement and incredibly powerful as well. All right. So the next thing I wanted to show is how important Agile is, right? But you need the right type of tooling. And GitHub is a fantastic DevOps tool set for a variety of different reasons, right? DevOps is all about doing whatever it takes to move at a faster rate and to be delivering value. And GitHub makes it super easy to do cross-team type of collaboration. So it really enforces communication and collaboration through things like social coding via their pull request process. And I think we're all really familiar by now with GitHub's pull request process. But recently, GitHub added something called code spaces, which takes social coding to a whole new level. And what is code spaces? Well, with just a click of a button, GitHub will now create for you an entire dev environment for you to run in the cloud, accessible by any browser. And this environment is running inside of a container that's hosted up in Azure, right? And it is 100% customizable by you. You can literally customize exactly how you want that container to look. So what this means is by setting up a debug environment for complex environment, it becomes ridiculously simple, right? It's just a click of a button. And inner sourcing an app becomes incredibly simple as well. It's just a couple of clicks. So I wanted to show you what that experience looks like. All right, so here is, let me pull this up. All right, so here is, oops, it got disconnected, so let me go ahead and start that up. Here is my GitHub repo. And in this repo is my Sunrise stand-up application, right? This is a Node.js application. It's not that big of a deal. It is fairly complex because it has a back-end API layer, and it also has a single-page application running, right? So we have to serve up the web server itself, and that will serve up this React.js application. So to create code spaces, it's simple enough. You click on code, you say open with code spaces, and you go ahead, either you create a brand new code space, or you can go ahead and launch your code space itself, right? So it takes a little bit of time to create this and to load everything up, but here we go. It creates, what you see right now is in the browser, we have Visual Studio Code. And this is real Visual Studio Code of my project. Everything's laid out, ready to go. My dev environment is now ready to go. So this is real Visual Studio Code, right? So I can do things like, I don't know, let's start doing a for loop. Let's do a for each. And again, I can do all the autocomplete. It has my IntelliSense, is everything that I need. Why? Because this is real world Visual Studio Code. What I thought was really cool about this is my debugging experience from here. It becomes really, really simple as well, right? If I want to debug, let's go ahead and jump to the debug window. Let's go ahead and start my debugging. Again, remember, this application has two portions of it. First, it has my backend API that's running. It's a whole set of API, and they run in Azure Functions. And it also has my web front end. So what I'm doing here is I'm attaching my debugger and starting both my backend and also my front end. So as you can see, it's now debugging two parts of my application. And if we click on the console, we'll now be able to see that, look, it's even set up all the port forwarding for me as well. So if we wait here long enough, it will literally bring up the browser with the URL, and we can immediately start seeing our application. Now, this takes a little bit to start the very first time. Oh, here we go. But what is it doing? It's now going to go ahead and connect. It's going to forward and connect up to our application. And check this out. Bam, it's hit my breakpoint, right? So now I can do all the things that you would expect you should be able to do. Like I can trace in, I can trace out, I can skip, I can walk through my code, and right, we can hover on stuff. You can see values of parameters, you can see values of variables. Again, this is just your debug session, and now you can do all the debugging magic that you've always done before. So why do I love this so much? Man, this is freaking awesome because it makes everything so much easier for me, right? I don't need a dev environment on my machine. Setting up and configuring one of those the first time, it's a serious pain in the butt, right? Just with a click of a button from my pull request, bam, I can immediately start debugging, I can start fixing, I can start doing whatever it is that I need to do. Right. Makes working with containers really, really easy because all that routing and the proxying and everything that's taken care of for you. And again, this is my personal dev machine that's running in the cloud, which means I can customize this however I need to. I can add whatever extensions in VS Code that I want to. I can add things through the Bash terminal. It is literally my own dev environment to customize however I need to. So this is one of the features inside of GitHub, one of the tools inside of GitHub that makes DevOpsing even better, even faster. This is something that I really, really love, right? It makes me get up and going much, much, much quicker. All right. The next thing that I wanted to show was automating your workflow was with GitHub Actions, right? So Actions, for those that don't know, Actions in GitHub is GitHub's automation engine, where you can automate pretty much anything inside of GitHub, including things like CI/CD. But what I really wanted to show is a real-world use case for Actions that goes beyond just a simple CI/CD pipeline. For instance, one of the things my team does to ensure quality is I make everyone go through a pull request before their code hits the main branch, right? Which sounds great. However, when we do this in the real world, we run into some issues. So first of all, pull requests keep getting lost in the shuffle, right? So people would create a pull request, and the rest of my team, they would either miss that pull request or maybe they would ignore it. But basically, pull requests would start piling up with nobody reviewing them. And there are some amazing benefits to using pull requests, but if you don't review them immediately and they start piling up like this, your dev work then comes to a grinding stop. So that's a huge problem, right? Another problem that we had when reviewing code changes in a pull request is that my team, they really wanted to see the changes running in a test system or running in a staging environment, right? So what this meant was, if we wanted for this to happen, for every pull request, they now had to build the app, package the app up, provision the infrastructure they needed for a staging environment, configure that correctly, and then they needed to deploy the new build of the pull request into this freshly provisioned staging environment, right? And now, finally, they could see their changes. And oh, but they're not done yet, right? Because when they're done with the pull request, they need to remember to clean up all that mess. So for each pull request, and there can be multiple pull requests happening at the same time, right? They would need to spin up multiple environments. And then when they're done with the pull request, they need to spin it all down and tear everything down. So that sounds completely crazy, right? Like being able to do this for every pull request, that would be so incredibly cool. But oh my goodness, to actually do this would be impossible to do it correctly and quickly every single time. So this is where automation and GitHub Actions come to the rescue. Because remember, GitHub Actions is the automation engine, right? So using Actions, I can now create an automated workflow that will take care of all of this. Now, so to solve the problems of my pull request stacking up with no one really knowing that a pull request actually exists, what I did was I created a swim lane in our Kanban board using Azure Boards, right, called pull requests. So now whenever there's a pull request, I'll have Actions automatically create a pull request work item for me, link it to the GitHub pull request, and I'll put it onto the Kanban board. So this way, it becomes really apparent that there are PRs waiting for my team to look at. And if no one picks it up quickly, as the Scrum Master, now I can jump down my team's throat, shake them really hard until someone quickly picks it up and actually does it, right? But wait, as cool as it is, there's more that we can do. Next, what I'm going to have done is I'll have Actions automatically build my application, package up my application so it's ready to be deployed. And then, since I'm using Azure App Service to host my application, I'll dynamically create a staging slot for my staging environment for this specific pull request. So I'll name it after the pull request ID. And then when I deploy my application, I'll deploy it into this specific slot. Now, I'm not quite done yet because to find the URL for my staging slot is going to be a pain because remember, it's dynamic. It changes every single time. So what I'm also going to do is I'll use Actions to write back to my pull requests with a link to my staging environment for this pull request. So now whoever's doing my pull request, it's super easy to review it. They can review the code changes. In the comment, there'll be a link to the staging environment. I can click it and then immediately see the changes that happened as well. And again, to be a good citizen, when the pull request is closed, I'll have my action go ahead and clean up the slot and basically delete that slot for me in my Azure App Service. So, sounds completely nuts. Let's go see this in action. All right. So here is my application. It's held inside of GitHub, and it's just my application held inside of GitHub, right? Here is my Azure resource group that is hosting my application. Here's the app service that is going to host my website. If I go ahead and click on it, we'll be able to see my deployment slots. And you'll notice at this moment, I have no deployment slots except for my production deployment slot. And over here is my board that I use for my particular team, right? And I've customized this to work for my specific team. So what you're going to see on here is a swim lane for emergencies, right? So if there's an emergency, if there's a live site incident, immediately people can see it and start doing their stuff. I have a swim lane for pull requests and then my in-sprint items as well. Now for my pull request, you notice that currently in the approved column, there is nothing, right? Because all the pull requests have been assigned and people are starting to work on the code review. So if I go ahead and let's go ahead and create a new pull request, let me make a change. Let's make a change to the README file because that's what I always do in my demo. We'll edit this and we'll jump to the very, very bottom. And let's go ahead and add another change. Added one more change. And as you can see, I've run this demo a couple times already. And we'll go ahead and create a new branch and we'll name this we made a change for work item number. How about we choose work item number 432? All right. So let's propose this change. And after I propose this change, I'll go ahead and create a pull request. Now, as soon as I create this pull request, it's going to start my automation, right? So it's going to go ahead and start my build. It's going to start adding new work. And as you can see, the automation is kicked off. And if we click on the Actions tab, we can actually see the actions running in real time, right? So in parallel, I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm first going to go ahead and create a work item for myself in Azure DevOps. And then I'll go ahead and build my application as well. So it takes a little bit of time to do all this. So while it's doing this, let me go ahead and show you exactly how you set up these actions inside of GitHub. So what you do is off of your root directory, you'll have a .github/workflows directory. And inside of here, all the actions are described in YAML. And I know YAML is not the favorite syntax of everybody, right? Myself included, but the schema is really pretty simple. First, you give it a name, and then you have an on section, and here is all the triggers that can trigger your workflow. So I'm literally saying, hey, if it's a pull request and it's either open, synchronized, reopened, or closed, and it's to the master branch, go ahead and trigger this particular workflow. I've also added the workflow dispatch, and what this means is I've created a manual trigger as well. So I'll be able to trigger this with a button, and I added that for debugging purposes. Next, you describe all of your jobs. So I have a couple jobs, and they run in parallel, right? So the first one, I create a pull request work item inside of my Azure DevOps board, and I put it onto the right column and all that stuff, right? I put it into the right column and into the right swim lane. How do I do that? I wrote my own custom GitHub action, right? So an action is basically just JavaScript, which means anything I can do from code, I can get a custom action to do, which really translates into anything, right? So literally what I'm doing is I'm using the Azure DevOps REST API to create a brand new work item of the correct pull request type, and I set the values for it to be in the correct swim lane on the correct board, right? All right, so that's what I'm doing. Next is my build workflow, or I'm sorry, my build job. And again, this is running in parallel with my create PR work item. And this one just build my application, builds everything, packages everything up so it's ready to be deployed. And then finally, I have it deployed to staging. This does not run in parallel. This waits until my build job is done. And then once it's done, I go ahead and download my build artifacts, which is going to be my web app ready to be deployed. I have a debug statement. And after my debug statement, I get my pull request values from this particular workflow. So I'm using the GitHub API to do that, and I wrote a custom action to do that as well. So this basically is what I need from here is the pull request number, right? Because remember, I need that number to be a unique number so that I can tack it onto the end of my environment name, my slot name, so that each one of my pull requests can have a unique slot of their own. Right? So when that's done, this is where I do the heavy lifting, and this is kind of cool. I use the Azure CLI to do everything I need for me inside of Azure. So the first thing that I do is I log into Azure using the Azure CLI. Then I create a brand new slot, and it has a unique name because I tack on the pull request number, right? And then finally, I deploy my application using the Azure CLI, once again, into that specific slot. And then once that's done, I add my comment, right? And this is kind of cool because, again, GitHub is very, very open. They have a marketplace where people have opened up and published their actions that they've written, their own custom actions. So this guy here has already created an action that will let you write a comment back into your pull request really, really easily. So I create a comment that says created staging environment, and I pass in the URL, this dynamic URL to my specific slot itself. All right, so by now, everything should be done. Let's jump back into our actions and take a look and see what happened. So we've created our pull request work item, and we've built our application, and now we've deployed it into that dynamically created staging slot. So if we go into our Azure, if we go into our Azure portal, let's refresh this. We should see a brand new slot, and dum, 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 there it is, our brand new slot that it dynamically created for us. If we go into Azure Boards, notice it created this brand new work item for me, right? How cool is that? Again, actions is just code, which means you can make it do anything that you want. And finally, if we go back to this specific pull request, let's jump to the pull request. We can see, you can see that there is a brand new comment that says created the staging environment. And if we click on it, it will take us to our application running in the staging slot. Now, how freaking awesome was that, right? Automation can make our lives so much easier. So what I just showed was a very complex workflow for pull requests, and it includes included CI/CD as well, and it was all automated using GitHub Actions. So the point I was trying to get across is, yes, in today's world, DevOps is no longer a nice to have, right? It is absolutely necessary for us to stay competitive, where we must continuously deliver value to our end users. And to do this successfully, we have to embrace Agile, and we must embrace DevOps best practices. And GitHub is an amazing product which can help enable all of this for us. So thank you all so much. Hopefully you enjoyed the demo that I showed with GitHub Actions. What you can do with Actions is pretty much whatever your imagination can think of, right? Again, it is way more than just a CI/CD system. It is an automation engine for all things inside of GitHub. All right, thank you very much. 45 minutes exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Abel. This was a great session, a lot of energy.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me.
Yeah, that was great. And I think, people that are not, are new to Azure DevOps, I think you brought the enthusiasm across really well. So hopefully they will start, if not already started, with Azure DevOps. Thank you so much.